Okay, so Apple had their iPad event and I wanted to release a video right away, but then I decided to take my time and really analyze the event. The event itself only took about 30 minutes, and other than the 3-minute intro where Tim Cook talked about the Apple Vision Pro, it was all about the iPad, specifically iPad Air and iPad Pro. It had almost been 2 years since the last iPad was released, which is the longest they've ever gone since the iPad was introduced. I'm going to break this video into 2 parts. First, I'm going to break down all the details about the 2 iPads that were released, and then I'm going to give you my take on the issue with the iPad. So strictly informative for the first part, and then the second part will be my personal opinion. So first up, we have the new M2 iPad Air. Nothing too exciting here, and that's reflected by the time Apple spent on announcing it. The new M2 iPad Air now comes in 2 different sizes, an 11-inch and a 13-inch. The front-facing camera is now on the landscape edge on both iPads, the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, which should help with video calls. The colors for the new M2 iPad Air are blue, purple, starlight, and space gray. The colors are not what many expected, but they stay in line with Apple's pastel colors choice for the iPad Air. They updated the iPad Air from the M1 chip to the M2 chip, which Apple claims is 50% faster, and 3 times faster than iPads with a 12A Bionic chip. The new M2 Air works with the Magic Keyboard and the new Apple Pencil Pro. I'll cover that a little later in the video. The M2 Air has a faster CPU, GPU, and neural engine, which should make your daily tasks even more buttery smooth than they were already. The storage options are 128, 256, 512, and a whopping 1 terabyte. The 11-inch starts at $599, and the 13-inch starts at $799. Now we have the all brand new redesigned iPad Pro. Okay, redesign is a little bit of a stretch, but there are some changes. The new iPad Pro also comes in the same 2 sizes, an 11-inch, which is 5.3 millimeters thin and weighs less than a pound, and the 13-inch that is 5.1 millimeters thin and weighs 1.28 pounds. Now, this makes it the thinnest product Apple has ever made. This makes it even thinner than the iPad Nano. While all this is super cool and it seems almost impossible how thin these iPads are, I can only imagine how easily they are going to bend. I have iPad Pros come into the shop all the time, and more times than not, the iPad frame is bent. And just as a side note, the iPad Pro is now lighter and thinner than the iPad Air. Just thought I would throw that out there. Moving on. The 2 color options are silver and space gray. Now, the display is where the redesign really happened. For the first time ever, the iPad has an OLED display. Apple is calling the display the Ultra Retina XDR, and it has a brightness of 1000 nits with a peak brightness of 1600 nits for HDR content. This is possible thanks to what Apple is calling tandem OLED. And this is basically 2 OLED displays stacked on top of each other, making that peak brightness possible. I think this might have been my favorite part of the whole event. We all know OLED is awesome, the pitch blacks, the individual lit pixels, the super vibrant colors. The concern was, however, how bright can you make an OLED display on a device that many use outside? Well, Apple fixed this concern with that new tandem OLED. Now, this display does require a little bit more processing power, but that is no problem thanks to that new M4 chip that's inside. There were a lot of rumors about a new M4 chip coming out, but many thought it would just be the regular M3. Apple decided to surprise us with the new M4 chip, which is a 10-core CPU, which is made up of 4 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores, a 10-core GPU, and a 16-core neural engine, which should definitely help with the new AI features that are expected to release later this year. Apple claims that this is 50% faster than the M2. The storage options for this iPad are 256, 512, 1 terabyte, and 2 terabytes. The 11-inch starts at $999, and the 13-inch starts at $1299. And while all these hardware upgrades are great, this is where it's really hard to hide my personal opinion. But before I get into that, Apple also released a new Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro. Still ridiculously expensive, $299 for the 11-inch and $349 for that 13-inch. It now has a bigger trackpad and now has a function row, which I think will be very useful for things like volume, screen brightness, and being able to lock your screen. It is also lighter, so that's a great addition. There's also a brand new Apple Pencil Pro, which looks exactly like the old Pencil. It does, however, bring new features like Find My Support, which will be very useful if you constantly misplace your pencil. It'll also have features like a barrel roll, which will be a great addition for artists. A squeeze function to bring up tools in different apps. This new Apple Pencil is priced at $129. Now we get to the second part of the video. The new iPad Pro is a real beauty, and if you ignore iPadOS and strictly look at the hardware, it's an awesome product. However, the power of the M4 chip is almost useless, because at the end of the day, it's still running iPadOS. At the current moment, is there any real reason to update to this new M4 iPad Pro if you can't even truly use the processing power? I would argue that the M1 and the M4 iPad Pro will perform almost exactly the same because of the limitations of iPadOS. Now, I do understand that Apple seems to have something up their sleeve with iPadOS 18, but that's not guaranteed. A lot of people thought, including myself, that with the release of the M1 iPad a few years back, there would be a huge change and a huge push for iPadOS to be something more. And Apple does seem to want to push the iPad to be some sort of laptop replacement with the additions like that Magic Keyboard and some of the ads they've ran, but ultimately, they have only limited the iPad. I apologize if this sounds like a rant, but the iPad is one of those products that has so much potential but has never got there. And this is from the very beginning of the iPad. And it gets even more confusing when you look at pricing, because in similar configurations, the iPad Pro is more expensive than a MacBook Pro per se. For example, if I get a M3 MacBook Pro with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage, I can get it for $1,999. And a similar configuration for the iPad Pro with 16 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte of storage, and the Magic Keyboard, it's $2,249. The iPad Pro is $250 more expensive, but I can do so much more on a MacBook Pro. And I do understand that the iPad is maybe a luxury device, but at the same time, if I'm paying more for it, I should be able to do more, or at least you'd think. I honestly feel like the iPad Pro should be my favorite Apple product ever, but it has caused me more frustration than joy. Hopefully this is the year that everything changes, fingers crossed. That wraps it up for today's video. Please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the unboxing and review videos of the new iPad Pro, new Pencil Pro, and the Magic Keyboard. I'll see you in the next video.